This video is going to be an introductory video into a series that I'll do on sensory substitution. And this video is going to have three parts to it. The first part is going to be on my research. And my research is focused on spatial disorientation, which I'll define in a few moments. And kind of spatial disorientation relevant and specific to human space exploration and spaceflight. And as I was looking at this research of mine, I began to think about what kind of technological countermeasures can we develop. And as I thought about that, that brought me to the topic of human augmentation. And human augmentation is just the idea of taking technology like this, and using technology to enhance human performance and learning. So when I did that, and I'm reading some literature, I bumped into this term called sensory substitution. And as I was reading this, I was like, this might be interesting enough where the public would be like, ooh, I want to consume some of that. I want to think about some of these questions. And so that's what this video is. I should kind of also give a disclaimer. This video is like a blog or something, right? I haven't actually done a really rigorous literature review. This is just, I read a few review papers. That's all I've done. And then I'm just sort of digesting as I'm going. And if you want sort of a rigorous, presentation where it has my stamp of science approval on it, then I would say wait till the end of the series. By then I will have read, many more papers. So I'll talk about sensory substitution, give a really quick definition of it and why it may be relevant for my research. And then I'll finish the video by giving you a preview. And it'll be a preview of the next question I'll ask. And this is a question that I've been thinking about as I've been going through these review papers. And it's a question that exists at the interface of science and philosophy. The idea, when do humans feel merged with the machine? And is this a valuable question to ask? If you are an astronaut, for example, who needs to use technology, is there any utility for feeling merged with the machine or not? So these are it's the next question I thought I would ask. So I'm going to start with the introduction, and if you've already seen previous presentations I've done, then the introduction is more or less the same and you can kind of skip it. So my beginning storyline is, imagine that you are an astronaut and you're on a journey to go all the way to Mars, okay? And to get there, you had to spend months and months and months in 0G, right? Where if I blindfold you, the concept of up doesn't even exist. And I kind of want you to absorb what that means, right? Because every moment of our lives is somehow woven in with the idea of where gravitational vertical is, where the upright is. Even our language, I'm feeling kind of down today, has some reference to the gravitational vertical. So this is something really intrinsic to the human identity and the human experience. And now imagine that's all gone for, the many months that you're traveling to Mars. That alone is a very interesting question, okay? But, the more, relevant question for the research I do is that you spend months and months and months like this where there's no real concept of where up is, and then comes a day when you have to land upon the surface of Mars, and all of a sudden, knowing where up is a matter of life and death, right? As you try to stabilize that spacecraft, you better know where up is. If you don't, you're going to crash that aircraft or spacecraft. Now, what we also know is that astronauts will become very susceptible to spatial disorientation as they transition from outer space to the surface of Mars. And spatial disorientation is just when you don't have a good sense of where up is. Now, I should also say that, most likely by the time we go to Mars, most of the landing, probably much of it, if not all of it, will be automated. At the same time, technology can break, unpredictable things can happen, so astronauts should have a way of landing the spacecraft when they're disoriented. But also sort of to really emphasize how real this problem is. This is not a fictitious problem. The leading cause of fatal aircraft accidents, right, where they die for military pilots, is spatial disorientation, and that's on Earth. So forget the moon, forget Mars. On Earth, where we have a good sense of the terrain, where we have a fairly good sense of the weather, where you've got satellites circling the planet, where you can talk to headquarters immediately. In those circumstances, still, the leading cause of fatal aircraft accidents in military pilots is spatial disorientation. And it doesn't look like technology is reducing those rates of fatal aircraft accidents caused by spatial disorientation. So, in my opinion, spatial disorientation is a huge problem, and we need to, in my opinion, spend effort understanding when it happens, why it happens, and what kind of technological countermeasures can we develop. So that's kind of maybe where I come in. You could say, recreate a spaceflight analog condition, where people get disoriented, where they can't rely on gravitational information, similar to what an astronaut, may experience, or an Air Force pilot. I recreate that on Earth, in a lab, at Brandeis University. So you might be thinking, whoa, how do you do that? And so let me explain how I do that. So I strap people into this beast over here, and this is actually not the spaceflight condition. This is my control condition. I'll describe this first, and then I'll describe the spaceflight analog condition. So what I do is I strap people into this machine. You can see that I'm in this machine. I'm wearing my self-designed, because I designed them, predator-prey pants, and my mom sewed them for me. So I strap people in this machine, and the machine is programmed to behave like an inverted pendulum. And all an inverted pendulum means is that it's just like trying to balance like a pen on your fingertip. It's the same sort of dynamics. It just falls over if you do nothing, which is what you're seeing in this video. It just falls over to one side or the other. And this is a good first approximation, I would say, to human balancing, to like helicopter control, things like that. What you're also going to notice is that if you do nothing and the machine falls, it doesn't fall forever. It goes about 60 degrees, then the machine will stop and it will automatically reset to the balance point right at the upright, and then this trial will resume. So what people are instructed to do is grasp that joystick and use it to balance themselves right at the balance point, right at that 0 degree point, right at gravitational vertical, which is pretty cool. What you're also going to notice here is that I'm blindfolded and I'm wearing noise-canceling headsets. So in terms of sensory information that people are receiving when they're in this machine, they're not getting any visual information about where they are in space because they're wearing a blindfold. They're not, they don't have any auditory sense because of noise-canceling headsets. Majority of the sensory information about where they are is coming through their vestibular system, okay? And I'm going to describe what that is in a second. And they're also getting some information through their skin because they are pushing against that machine as they're moving. So the vestibular system, because not a lot of people know it, resides in your inner ears, okay? And to understand that, we are going to take a magic school bus ride into the inner ear. And that's what you're seeing right here. Wow. Now, in your inner ear, you've got two pieces, you could say, of the vestibular system. The first are the semicircular canal, and you've got one on each side, and there are three of them, and they're all at 90 degrees to each other. And they're filled with fluids, and then there are little hairs in there. And really all I want you to take away is that they detect angular acceleration. Really just, motion as you're rotating. That's what they're detecting. The second component of the vestibular system, and this is the most relevant for the research that I'm doing, are the otolith organs. And the otoliths are these fine little hairs suspended in gelatinous material adorned by crystals, crystals in your inner ear. It's pretty crazy. And they detect linear acceleration. And the most important part for my presentation is that they detect tilt from gravitational vertical. And what that means is that as your head tilts from the vertical, from upright, those hairs are deflecting. The more you tilt, the more those hairs deflect. What that means is that you can have your eyes closed, and the more you're sort of away from the vertical, you still have a good sense of how much you're tilted because these hairs are deflecting, letting you know. So to sort of summarize in this condition, I call this my upright condition. This is my control condition. You have a pretty good sense of where you are because of your otoliths, because of gravitational information. The more you tilt, the more those hairs deflect. You have a pretty good sense of how fast you're going and how much you're accelerating through your canals. And you have a mix of both of those pieces of information that your skin is picking up as you press against that machine. Okay, so in this condition, and I'm not really going to go over too much data in this presentation, basically the summary is that when I put people in this, in the beginning, they're stressed out, they're sweating, I can kind of smell it, they're all over the place, and as time goes by, because they have a good sense of where they are, even though they're blindfolded, they learn to balance it, and by the end, most are able to reach this nirvana-like state of balancing bliss. Okay, now let's go into my space flight analog condition. So in this, what I do is I take the people, and now as you can see here, I tilt them onto their back. Now, what's really cool about this condition is that all the dynamics are the same. So just like in the upright where the machine was programmed to fall over, here the machine is sort of programmed to fall, where basically it's moving to the left or right, and you have to stabilize yourself around that center point, the 0-degree point. Now, why is it that I call this a spaceflight analog condition? Well, if you remember, in the upright condition, the more you tilt it from the balance point, the 0-degree point, the more those hairs deflected. So all you have to do is, determine how much your hairs are deflecting, and you know exactly where that balance point is. But when I put you on your back, those hairs are just pointing down. They're saying, hey, you're on your back, you're 90 degrees from the vertical. And it doesn't matter if you're at the balance point or really far away from the balance point, those otolith hairs now are just saying you're on your back, you're on your back, you're on your back. So what that means, this is a little bit confusing, but this is the most important part of the presentation, is that when you're on your back, you can't use gravity anymore to figure out how far away you are from the balance point, because you're no longer tilting relative to gravity. You're always the same distance from gravity. So really, when you're on your back, you don't have a sense of position, like how far away you are from the balance point. You do have a sense of how fast you're going and how much you're accelerating. Those are the only pieces of information that you have to do this task. And it's redundant with your skin, because your skin is also only picking up acceleration velocity. So this is similar to what an astronaut may experience. If they're blindfolded, if they can't see properly, as they're trying to land, if there's, lunar dust or whatever. Now what's interesting, and again, I'm not going to, focus necessarily on the data. I kind of just want to paint the picture of like what people experience in this, right? You put people on their back, and it's like really surreal, because like within a few of these movements, people lose complete track of where they are. Even me, I start drifting away. There's this weird positional drifting where as you're drifting, you feel like you're at the balance point, but actually you're getting further and further and further away until you hit the crash boundary. And then you're like, wow, I had no idea that I'm so far away. People be 50, 60 degrees away and they think they're at the balance point. It's really crazy. You're like, I couldn't even believe that. 90% of people say that they experience disorientation. They don't really know where they are. And there, 10% of people will experience some sort of weird vestibular illusion. And in a way, maybe it's not super surprising, because you're missing this important piece of information that you usually use while balancing. And so what does your brain do? It tries to recreate reality based on whatever it has. And some people may put greater emphasis on signals that maybe should not receive as much emphasis. So, some people feel, believe it or not, like they're completely upside down. Even though they're on their back, even though they should be receiving tactile information from their back, they feel like they're completely upside down. It's so crazy, so crazy. Some people, like myself, yours truly, knows this experiment in and out. And yet, when I'm in this machine, I know it can only operate between 60 and negative 60. I feel like I'm going 360 degrees. It's pretty insane. It's pretty insane. And again, not everyone experiences this, which is also really interesting. Okay, so it's a weird, surreal, unusual experience. And you can imagine that if you happen to be an astronaut or a pilot, within that 10% who feels like they're upside down, in this condition, you could imagine that that may lead to some pretty significant problems if you experience something similar to that while you're, trying to land or maneuver, things like that. So to re-summarize or whatever, summarize, the reason why this is happening is because you're missing that sense of position that you usually get from gravitational cues. And so now here is my research question. Can we replace that missing information of how far away you are from the balance point that usually you get from your otoliths, using instead now technology through a different sensory system? And what I mean by that is, what if we used a bunch of vibrators? I mean, put those vibrators on your body, right? And as you move, let's say, in one direction, the vibrators activate, and then as you're moving in the other, the vibrators activate. And this way, through the sense of vibration, you have a good sense of where that balance point is. Now, this idea is not necessarily novel. People have looked at this. Here's an image of people looking at it in a military setting. But what's really interesting is that there's a huge universe of research that still hasn't been done with this sort of technology and exploration, especially if you've got the machine that I have at my disposal. There are a whole bunch of questions that I can ask. And so that was what my next proposal was actually on. And I would have finished by now had it not been for COVID. So now I'm waiting for COVID to be over so I can run these experiments. Everything is ready to go. So in any case, as I was thinking about these devices, like using vibrations to replace the missing sort of gravitational information that you usually use, I bumped into the topic of sensory substitution. And this is a review paper right over here that I kind of like. It's understandable. So if you want to get like an intro into it, read this one. This is the one that I'm going to base the rest of the presentation on. So, and Bakirita is, he was really focused a lot of his research and is famous for the sensory substitution work that he's done. So just imagine, for this one example, a person who has just lost their vision, or their hearing, or their ability to balance. Now, this person still has a lot of neural machinery, you could say, that can analyze all that information. It may just be, oh, my eyes are no longer working, but I can process that information. If somehow you could give that pattern of information that your eyes receive somewhere else, that machinery then could analyze it. And so one idea was, well, what if we express that, for example, through vibrations or touch? A very similar pattern as to what your eyes see through your skin. Then maybe that can be processed by your visual center, right? And the idea is that the brain is plastic, and so you can build associations, and so eventually if you keep presenting these patterns, an association will be built, and you will get something that can, like substitute vision. And that's where sensory substitution comes from, this idea that you replace one sensory system with another one. And one classic example could be Braille. Usually people you'll use vision to read, but you can also use touch to be able to read. And then there are several other examples. So the example in the review paper, which I thought was really cool, and this was like one of the first experiments by Bakirita. And what they did was they got this dentist chair, okay? And it's really pretty crazy. It's really kind of interesting. And you can see sort of like on the back there, that grid. And that is a grid of 400 solenoids. And solenoids are, it's like a coil of wire. You get this like, metal rod, and then you pass like a current through it, and the metal rod just, pokes out. So what they have the ability to do is activate these 400 rods, and any one of them can come out and poke your back as you're sitting on it, okay? And then they connected a movie camera to these 400 solenoids. So whatever the movie camera saw, it converted that into pokes on the back. So if, let's just say simply, it just saw a square, then you have a square pattern of rods coming out and poking you. And then they took, blind individuals and they put them inside, in the chair, and they gave them control over the camera so that the person could just orient it and explore the environment. So it's pretty cool. And within the first hour, people were able to discriminate horizontal and vertical and curved lines, which you could imagine would be pretty simple. You know, you feel a poke like this on your back. Oh, it's a horizontal. You know, this is a vertical line. That may be kind of fast to do. And I'll probably at one point do a whole video just on training, because I'm kind of interested, like the devices that I make for my apparatus, what does training look like? And there are papers on that, but they're not like, there's a lot more to be learned. So in any case, they train afterwards on 25 different objects that you show the camera, and then they sort of try to identify it. And after 10 hours of training, which is a good amount, they're able to identify it within 5 to 20 seconds. Then, and this is really where I start getting interested at the sort of philosophical side, if you can call it that, after 20 to 40 hours of training, they reported feeling like the sensation was coming, you know, not from their back, but as if it was coming from the front of the camera as they were pointing at it. Now this is what I, in my language, would call, they sort of merged with the machine. They sort of merged with this device. It's no longer this artificial poking on the back, but you somehow feel like, yeah, like it's coming from in front, that information, and you're able to process it using the camera. That was really interesting to me. And here's a quotation from a blind philosophy student who used this. Very soon after I had learned how to scan the sensations, very soon after I had learned how to scan, the sensations no longer felt as if they were on my back, and I became less and less aware that vibrating pins were making contact with my skin. By this time, objects had come to have a top and a bottom, a right side and a left, but no depth. They existed in an ordered two-dimensional space. It's really kind of mind-blowing, right? So then the next question I had is, how minimal can you get? How, this is 400 little pokers, but how few pokers could you get and still maintain this ability to like merge with the machine? That was sort of one of my questions. And one of the reasons why I was interested in this is the first video that I did, and I encourage everyone to watch it, was with Tasha, who's a really amazing person, and she's blind, and she talked about, in her opinion, the limitations of sensory substitution. Because we were talking and I was like, what if we designed like a device that could, convert how far away you are from objects and how tall objects are into vibrations on your body? And for her life journey, that didn't seem as appealing. And she said that, for her, and she, the way that she expresses it is really, I can't do justice to it, so, you'd have to watch it. But I think essentially what she said was like the language of these vibrations, don't seem intuitive to the body and to the mind. And so she felt like they were, in that sense, lacking. But the reason why I got interested is that if you can actually merge with these machines, that may suggest that yes, in fact, that language does eventually become intuitive. So how generalizable are these ideas too? So I had to do more literature review on that too. From the few review papers that I read, there's not like a very obvious like how many people does this affect? Does this affect everyone or just a few? And I'll address some of those larger questions later on. So again, on the question of how few sensory information can you get before you lose that sense of merging with the machine, here's another device that they created, and this was actually made by Kurt, and the team. And Kurt came on to our Brandeis group and gave a small talk. So he's a really chill, really cool guy. And he designed this, and this is a tongue shocker. So you've got a 12 by 12. If you look at the thing next to the quarter here, a 12 by 12 grid. And these things just shock your tongue a little bit, okay? And they connected that to now a camera. So if a camera saw an X, you get a X-shaped shock on your tongue. And sure enough, people learned how to use this. It enhanced balance control in those people that had balance deficits. It helped people who could not see identify objects, even like catch like a rolling ball, things like that, which is really cool. And in some of those review papers, they write that people experienced feeling like they merged with this device, which is amazing. And actually, I kind of learned a little bit about this when I listened to a Radiolab episode on this. And there, the way they expressed it, and I haven't heard it in years, but from what I remember, like they were like, these people regained sight. And I was like, what? Regain sight? That's so insane. Now, when I read the research papers, though, I think that's expressed a little bit more cautiously. Okay, so continuing on this, preview of a question, how few sensory information we had 400 solenoids, then we had 144 tongue shockers, still does it, and in this paper, this is in the review paper, they looked at patients that had lost peripheral sensation, like sensation from their fingertips, from leprosy, and these images of leprosy is from Wikipedia. And what they did is they put gloves on these individuals, and the gloves had touch sensors at the end of them, pressure or force sensors that as you push down, it activates. And they took that and they attached it to little shockers on your forehead, which is pretty crazy. So you have 5 little shockers on your head. So if your pinky, touches something, this little shocker goes off, and you feel it on your head. Okay, so it's only 5 now. Does a person feel like they're merged? And from this, I found some more information from Kurt's dissertation thesis, and it says that patients could distinguish smooth from rough surfaces, soft from hard. They were able to detect edges and corners. And after becoming accustomed to the device, the patients experienced the data generated in the glove as if they were originating from their fingertips, ignoring the sensations on the forehead. So again, it's pretty amazing that you can feel it. Now again, I haven't done a super in-detail literature search, so that's what the next video is going to be on. But from the cursory one that I did, I still haven't found, from the few papers I read, a super in-depth look at this feeling of merging with the machine. And in a way, it seemed like there weren't a very large number of people that this was tried upon. But again, I'm sure there are other papers, and I haven't done a full research on it. So finally, the paper I'll conclude with is this one over here. This is an older paper, and so we went from 400 to 144 to 5 to 1. Okay, here's 1. And what this person did, it's pretty crazy, is they attached a photocell. So it's something that, just on your fingertip, you attach a photocell. All a photocell does is detect light. So imagine being in a dark room with the flashlight pointed somewhere. So if you're away from the flashlight, and they connected that photocell to a little vibrator, okay? And so then, no vibration, no vibration, no vibration, and as soon as you get light on that fingertip of yours, vibration, vibration, and then again when you're away, no vibration. And so in this way, you could sort of point your finger around, and the moment you felt vibrations, you would know that there's light that's coming from in front of you. And they did this with a blindfolded person in a dark room. And again, what's crazy about this is that they got this published, but it's one person. All right? They only use one person. So, take that with whatever it may mean. But it's very few people. But still, whatever. It's interesting to talk about. So, in a few minutes of exploration, this person could indicate the direction, the distance, and the volume of the light. And after some more time, the subject actually comes to forget the place in which the sensation occurs. Now, obviously, if they pay attention, they know that there's a vibration happening, okay? But the point is that you can almost lose track of that, and now you really feel like you have a magic finger that can kind of see where the light is, which is pretty crazy from the perceptual side, right? I should say, the reason why I'm kind of interested in this is that, I'm interested in the human journey with technology. Right? And to me, the idea of merging so that you are in the flow is really a fascinating idea. That perceptual feeling that you've just enhanced yourself, and now you can feel also, can you feel magnetic fields? Can you feel electric fields? Things like that, I think, fascinate me from, just the dreaming side. Now, what we don't know, and these are the questions I'm going to try to answer in the next video, is what are the individual differences in humans merging with technology? Are there some people that just don't merge? They're like, this is stupid. There's no way I'm going to merge with this. I just feel vibration on my, forehead all the time, and that's it. And if that's the case, are there some people who just merge right in? And if that's the case, are there personality traits that predict who is going to feel like they've merged with the machine and who is not? Because that would be interesting to find that would be interesting to know. Like they have personality tests. What would happen if you then started to look at what is your personality type with merging with machines? And this is also, are these the same people who maybe have an affinity to merging with machines that are also affected by placebo? Because I would love to tap into that, right? Like sometimes people are like, oh, placebo, you take a sugar pill and now all of a sudden you feel pain less. Maybe your global pain response goes down, or your global stress response goes down, or your depression feels less. I think for the individuals that can eat a sugar pill or just through suggestion can reduce those things, that's pretty extraordinary. How do we tap into that? I'm sure there's literature on that too, and maybe one time I'll do a video on placebo effect. But talking about that, the other thing is that I've been meeting with just once actually a few of my former colleagues from Brandeis who graduated from the neuroscience department, and we talk a little bit about psychedelics, just about how does that affect the neural circuitry, what insights does it give into neuroscience in general. And one of the things that people who take psychedelics say, I think, is that as they take it, some of them feel as if their ego is dissolving and they feel like they're connected to the rest of the universe, right? Now, how crazy would it be that, if you use psychedelics, would you then start feeling merged with the machine better? If you're a NASA astronaut who's connected to, different devices to enhance, your abilities and reduce spatial disorientation or whatever, do we give you psychedelics so you can merge with the machine, and now all of a sudden, you and the machine are one? That's kind of interesting. And if you look at some of these people who talk about psychedelics, they also say mindfulness and meditation can sometimes get you to the same place. So could we use meditation to enhance a person's feeling that they're merged with machines? I think these are questions that are not really fully answered. I haven't done the literature search, so I don't know. But I will, and then we can talk about it more. Also, the main question might be is there any utility to merging with the machine? Okay, let's just say I feel merged with the machine. Does that mean I perform any better? Does it mean I learn any faster? Are there any advantages to it? Or is it just sort of like a cool, fun thing to feel, but it doesn't really have any practical advantage? So that's something that I think is worth talking about and exploring. Now, here are 3 steps, and this is targeted towards, and I'll put this in the link. I'll put Tasha's video in the link, and I'll also in the descriptions, and I'll put a link to our Brandeis group. Our Brandeis group has undergrads and it has high school students, and it's open to everyone. And we sort of explore like skill sets, like programming Arduinos and stuff like that, but also like making stuff. And so these 3 steps are targeted towards them, but this is anyone who wants to collaborate on this, just message me and I'd be happy to do it. The first is we need to do some scientific literature search, and I've actually made a video series on how to do that. So I'll put a link to that in the description as well. So first is we do scientific literature review to answer some of these questions, and really find where are the questions to be asked, and where have things already been found, and how do we add on to the bed of science that's already been done. And then step 2 is once we've done that, we will summarize it. We can make a video. Anyone who wants to collaborate on that video, I'll totally be down for that. And then develop our own interesting viewpoint. And the third step, which I think would be really cool, is to then make our own small device, like the photocell tactor or something like that, and then just run some fun experiments on ourselves to explore individual differences in ourselves. Are there personality traits in us that make us more merging or not? Some of the other questions I talked about. So I'd love to do this whole thing, not only form an opinion based on scientific literature, but also run some just like fun experiments. And then if there seems like there's something there, we can always run legit, like rigorous scientific experiments. And I totally collaborate with anyone on that.